Hi, I'm Dr. Kujan. We are in this series looking at Catholic social teaching. We've most recently looked at solidarity, our call to form a human family with one another based on a sense of social friendship, charity, and justice. And we've looked at the Church's teaching on the human family as universal, just as the Church is universal. We are called to be everywhere with everyone, but also to live on a local level too. The Church is a sign of God's love everywhere, and it should be something that unites us all together as God's people. Solidarity means that we have a specific desire to reach out to others and to include them into our world. And ironically, even though technology has made it more possible than ever to reach people around the world, we are still at the same time divided as a people. And so to reach out to one another in love is what Jesus has taught us. And so we in society seek to live that out. There are two ways in which solidarity takes place. First, as a principle in our society, that we should avoid injustice and include others. But it's also a personal moral virtue, a desire to get involved and include others in what pertains to the common good. In Pope Francis's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, he talks about how we can build solidarity in our families, calling one another on in our family to a common way of life together that builds community, love, and develops the human person. Teachers who take children and form them, not just intellectually, but spiritually, emotionally, and socially. All the different ways in which those who present truth and communicate the news in our media, they have a responsibility to build solidarity grounded in truth and not based in lies. Solidarity is something that involves our service to those who are outcast. Just as Jesus reached out to lepers who were on their own because they divided themselves from others to keep them safe, we are called to reach out in love to those who are marginalized. And in that way, we together build something common, something rooted in God's love for us, because then we too share God's love with one another. There are two issues in particular that relate to international solidarity. And these are the migration of people across borders and warfare. When are either appropriate? The Church does not teach any specific immigration policy, but it does encourage people to consider two principles rooted in the gospel. The first is that people have a right to emigration, that they have the right to, if they have no way of life in their homeland, to move elsewhere. And there's also the complementary right of governments to regulate and enact laws regarding immigration. To recognize, on the one hand, the human dignity of the person, while at the same time responsibly regulating immigration for the sake of the common good. Those are the principles that, through the work of politicians, we hope to build as a better way of life in society. The Church presents the way in which we should be receptive of the stranger, of the foreigner, in order to recognize their human dignity and give them a way of life. The bishops of the United States and Mexico have given us some principles to keep in mind, that people have the right to opportunities in their homeland. They have the right to migrate to support themselves and their families. Sovereign nations have a right to control their borders. Refugees and asylum seekers should be afforded protection. And the human dignity and human rights of undocumented migrants should be respected. These 5 principles, which we spoke about, are ways to view this issue. There's one final issue, looking at war and peace. We ideally would prefer to maintain peace as much as possible. There are certain issues that happen in our world that does at times require a response of warfare. The Church says that there are only rare occasions when war is justified. That is when there's a just cause you're fighting for, a legitimate authority is declaring the war, that you have the right intention when entering a war. It's not to destroy your enemy, it's to defend yourself and to reconcile with the enemy afterwards. To keep in mind how likely it is you'll succeed at your objectives, and to make war a last resort, focusing on the gospel of peace and the desire to understand your enemy, to love your enemy, rather than just judge them and dismiss them rashly. So with all of these, we have a call to unite as God's people, to look at division where there exists division and try to heal that. We're not going to become all the same, but we can, in our diversity, be united as one in the gospel of Christ. One way that solidarity works itself out is through caring together for our common home, the earth. And that's what we're going to look at next time.